All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number 186 of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's episode to talk about the origin of the idea that it takes 21 days to form a habit, whether or not that is backed by science or maybe something that you wouldn't necessarily expect, I first want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. You've certainly got no shortage of podcasts that you can listen to and or watch. Reminder, this particular episode is available on YouTube also. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. So let's get into today's episode. Doubt that I'm going to be before you very long here. I'm just going to share a little bit of a tidbit that I came across, and I think that it's very fitting for this particular time of the year, although it can apply pretty much at any time. At the time of the recording and release of this particular episode, it's going to be January 17th, and there is this little known but starting to become more widely known fact that I believe it's the second Friday of January is known as National Quitters Day, the day where, for the most part, folks tend to fall off on whatever resolution that they set on January 1st. Now, I haven't done a whole lot of digging to try and figure out the exact origin of where that particular, I don't know if we should call it a holiday, where that particular day or designation came from. I've heard a few different things. The thing that I've heard most often has been actually dating it back or pulling the thread back to the origin from the app Strava, which is primarily used, I think, in the running space. I know my friend Kelly Lutz on the podcast that I co-host with her, Lifting, Running, and Living with Kelly and JK, shameless plug, talks about Strava and things like that in the running and ultra running world. But I believe that some of the National Quitters Day stuff comes from data that they had shared around information that they had. Anyways, so it seems like this particular episode might be fitting for that because the origin of what I want to talk about is where the idea came from that it takes 21 days to form a habit. And you might be surprised to know that it's actually connected to cosmetic surgery. So from what I was able to find, back in the 50s, there was a doctor named Maxwell Maltz, I believe is the name that it's pronounced. And what he reported was that his patients who had undergone some sort of cosmetic surgery, like a nose job, for example, I'm not sure why I just picked that. I just picked a random one. They reported back that on average, it took them about 21 days to become more comfortable with their new appearance, their enhanced appendage. That just sounded really dirty. But long story short, his patients were reporting back that it took them about 21 days to get used to the enhancements that they had gotten done from a plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery standpoint. He then took that particular idea and then, according to what he reported back and what he wrote a book about, I can't remember the name of the book. I know it's not cybernetics. I think maybe it's called like psychocybernetics. Yeah, I think it's called psychocybernetics. He wrote a book around this entire theory that he noticed it not only within his patients, also within himself as he tried to form different habits, that on average it took about 21 days. What then happens is that particular idea is then taken, and like we do most things, people start to latch onto it, they take it, they run with it, and then it basically becomes the mantra. It takes 21 days to form a habit. So first, yeah, who knew that? And maybe you're listening and you're like, dude, I totally knew that. Well, that was new information to me here in 2025. So yeah, the whole 21 days to form a habit is not at all based on, at least the origin of it is not based on any sort of science. It was based on feedback from people who had just undergone cosmetic surgery. So what I looked into was, okay, so if that's based on, that particular origin story based on cosmetic surgery, then where, what does science say about on average how long it takes for someone to form a habit. So, in doing a little bit of digging on that, what I found was generally, I'd say what's generally accepted is a study that was done back in, I'm going to try and pull this up while I'm on the pod, which is always great for people to wait and listen to. I believe it was back in 2009 or 2010, and I believe it was in London, somewhere in the UK, perhaps. There was a study that was done where by Philippa Lally, 96 people. So they took 96 people and gave them different habits that they could choose from, and they monitored them over a 12-week period. So what they did is they asked these people to pick one habit that they were going to implement, and they would do it over a 12-week period. So after monitoring that, what was found is that the folks reported back that it took them anywhere from 18 to 254 days. So you've got all these people that report back, and the fastest reported back time frame as far as and I looked into this a bit more. This is basically the individual saying that they had reached about an average of 95%. Autonomy is not the word. They felt like 95% of the time they were getting this particular thing done. So they completed it with consistency, about 95% consistency. The person that felt like they got it done in the shortest time frame, it took them about 18 days. The person who felt like it took them the longest amount of time in this particular study was at 254. So really, like, let that marinate for a second. It ranged from 18 days to 254 days. So then the average that came out of that particular study ended at 66 days. So if you then hear someone say, well, science says that it takes on average about 66 days to form a habit, remember, or be aware of, if this is new information to you, be aware that that 66-day number came from a range of 18 to 254. Okay. One other thing that I wanted to share that I thought was pretty interesting from that particular study, and I didn't dig deep into like all of the inner workings of this particular study. One thing that I did pull out that I thought was really, really telling is that the requirement for whatever habit that they picked is that they paired it with something that they were already doing. So for example, if they picked the habit of going for a walk, then it was paired with doing it after dinner. And there was one other example I think that I found, but I don't want to take more time to still do research while I'm on the podcast. But there was another example that had to do something with like drinking water. So it was when they ate breakfast, they also drank water. When they ate dinner, they also went for a walk. So basically the habit pairing or the habit linking or habit stacking, like pairing a new habit with something that was already being done. One other thing that was really cool in just reading some summaries of that particular study itself is that just totally lost my train of thought, was that it was made abundantly clear that the researchers were not looking for perfection. So the edict that was given, or the goal that was given, was report back to us once you've reached 95% consistency. So this is basically automatic. Around 95% of the time you get this particular habit done. So I thought that was really cool too. As I kind of scope out from this and think about, so how can we utilize that particular information? Like, first, the understanding that the whole 21-day thing isn't really based specifically on a whole lot of deep research. It's actually starting off with after you get a particular thing done cosmetically, it took you about 21 days, or it took these folks about 21 days to get used to the fact that they looked different and or felt different. Okay, so that's one. Then the second piece being, in a study that was done at this point about 15 years ago, the outcome was that on an average it took about 66 days, and now digging deeper, seeing that the range was anywhere from 18 to 254 days, taking those particular pieces of information, then also looking at the time of the year and the expectation that folks have, and myself included, on how long it takes in order for something to become a habit, something to become basically automatic that we don't really think about. If we were to remind ourselves that even in this particular study where you have close to 100 people, it ranged anywhere from 18 to 254, while they all were given the same strategy of pairing whatever that new habit was with something else. We may give ourselves, or hopefully give ourselves, a bit more grace in understanding what it really takes in order to form a habit. So just wanted to pass that particular one on. This is a short episode that I've got coming to you here. My intention for 2025 is to make sure that we have 2 or more episodes that are coming out per week, one on Tuesday that is more fitness, training, health focused, and then one on Friday that tends to be a bit more just kind of a random topic. This week, we're actually going to be getting 3 out because prior to this particular episode, you got a banger of an episode with my friend Jillian Bennett talking about really helping and mentoring coaches, nutrition coaches, to build their confidence to be able to get their clients results with more than just focusing on macros. So we've got a pretty solid week that we are closing out with for you here on the Help Me Understand podcast. So if you haven't listened to either of those previous episodes, either Tuesday's fitness related episode or the episode that came out yesterday, which would have been Thursday with Jillian, I definitely recommend going back to check those out. So in closing here, just a reminder, if you are currently beating yourself up because you feel like it's taking longer than it should in order for you to feel like a habit is automatic, and you're saying, well, I don't necessarily believe in the whole 21-day thing, but I had heard about this particular research that said 66 days. Remember that average of 66 was working from a range of 18 to 254 days. So my message for you there is just keep going. All right. So with that is going to wrap up today's episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. As always, thank you for listening. If you could leave a 5-star rating and or review, comment, like, subscribe, share, do all the things, I would sincerely appreciate that, as I am on a mission to move and impact through multiple streams here. So I could use your help with that. All right. So that's going to be today's episode. Thanks. Take care. And I'll talk to you next time.